I wasn't aware of that. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, that's true.
I need to go away, research that, and if you are correct, then fair enough.
No, you are absolutely right. There are certain people who did interpret the verse like that. But then others have come in and refuted them in the light of the Quran and the prophetic tradition that your idea, your view is wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
That view, which was there in the Shafi school, was that kind of dominant in the Shafi school, or is that a minority within the Shafi school?
That's a good question. I think even in the Shafi school it's a minority view. Okay. Yeah, because we know for a fact that we know for a fact that Egypt, for example, was at one time Shafi. Okay. And some of the rulers in Egypt were also Shafi. Okay. Sultan Saladin was Shafi. Okay. You don't see that behavior in his life. If you read the life of Salahuddin, okay, and he was not an unlearned Shafi. He was a very learned Shafi. He had scholars around him advising him on a daily basis. So we don't see that behavior even in the Shafis. Okay, it's a minority view within the Shafi school of thought.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I need to go away do my homework and find out more about that. The other question that I had was, so let's assume you're correct. Given that we interpret 929 in the light of the rest of the Quran, and that you shouldn't fight people just for their religion, given that is the case, why does 929 seem to be so religiously oriented? Why does 929 seem to, from my perspective, jar with the overall portrayal of the Quran when it comes to fighting people for their religion?
Because that's the most prominent verse on war in the Quran. So that's why it stands out in the Quran.
So you're saying, but that exacerbates the problem. Yeah. Why is the most prominent verse on violence in the Quran, which looks like it's about fighting people for their religion, to me and to many, why is that there, looking that way, when actually the rest of the Quran tells us that's not what that verse means?
Do you know the Quran also commands to fight the Muslims as well? Do you know about that?
The Munafiqun? I don't know.
Munafiqun are not Muslims.
Which verse you're referring to?
The verse where the Quran states that when two groups of believers fight each other, then try to make up between them. And the one who is the aggressor, and if they don't want to make up, one of them doesn't want to make up, then fight against the aggressor, even though they are Muslims.
That's fine.
Okay, so violence is not in the Quran. If you want to say violence or fighting is only towards the non-believers or disbelievers, according to the Quran, that would be a mistake. Because in the Quran we have these verses which are categorically commanding to fight Muslims.
Yeah, but in that
when they commit crimes, fight them.
But in that passage it is very clear, because obviously, we see in the Quran you're not supposed to fight Muslims for being Muslims, that's very clear.
Yeah.
And in those passages it is very clear that you fight them because they're aggressing against the other Muslim party. What I'm saying is,
in this verse it says that fight them because they are not Muslims.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Right. No, but then
because that verse is not saying fight them because they're Muslims.
If you read this verse on its own, no doubt you would walk away with that conclusion, no doubt.
I'm saying,
but if you read the Quran as a uniform text, you would never come up with that conclusion.
But my question is still, and it's not just one verse. It seems to be a few verses in this context.
Yeah.
If it is the case that you don't fight people for their religious beliefs, why does this verse, especially in Allah's, final
Romans.
Sorry.
Romans.
Okay, but
you see, we don't read the Quran
so much clearer.
Sorry?
Couldn't God have made it so much clearer?
Who was
as in, it would be so easy for, and I know this knife cuts both ways. You've got to be careful.
I'll give you an example. Yeah. Why is this verse not dealing with the Jews? Although it says people of the book, right?
Okay, it is dealing with the Jews, isn't it?
No. The Jews are there.
In 930. So 929, fight against such of those who have been given the scripture as believe not in Allah nor the last day, and forbid not that which Allah has forbidden by his messenger, and follow not the religion of truth until they pay the tribute readily being brought low. And the Jews say, Ezra is the son of Allah. And then 31, they have taken as lords beside Allah their rabbis. So this verse is talking about Jews as well as
Christians. And Christians, yes.
Both.
Yes, but amazingly...
Which actually makes me wonder if it's not the Roman Empire. If the Roman Empire...
No, it is the Roman Empire. How do we know this? Yeah. Because... Jews were had a treaty with Muslims.
Which
at this time?
Sorry.
At this time, there were Jewish tribes who were in peace with Muslims. They had a treaty with Muslims around Medina. You know about this, right?
I know there were different Jewish tribes.
Okay.
Some had churches,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, they were not attacked.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the verse talking about? If the Jews are not the point, if they're not the reference of this verse, so who's being attacked? Okay. So we know from the prophetic tradition. First of all, when was this verse revealed? It was revealed in the final year of the Prophet's life, in the year 9. Okay. Sorry, no, not year 9. Year 9 or 10. Few months before he passed away. Okay. And the imminent threat at that time was the Roman threat.
Okay, so
And it has been clarified in the prophetic tradition as well.
So we talked about this earlier. Let's say I accept all of the stuff about the background, history, the context. Fine, accept all of that for the point of this discussion. I'm still not clear why Allah didn't just say in Surah 9, fight those who are a threat to you, fight the treaty breakers, etc., as it does earlier on in Surah 9.
Yeah.
Why does it have to say fight those who do not believe, those who takes their rabbis and monks as lords? Why does it have to use such religious language?
Because Romans were fighting them for their religion. That's why. Because the Romans, you see, the Romans were coming with that attitude. They were fighting Muslims because they were Muslims.
So it's a rhetorical thing. It's saying you Romans are attacking us
For religion?
For our religion. Let's turn it back on its head.
Yes, you can say that. You can say that because the Romans had made it very clear. They had made it very clear that it is about religion. How do we know that? Because the messenger of the Prophet was killed by one of the allies. Okay, and when the Muslims went to avenge his murder, and it was illegal to kill messengers even at that time.
Yes.
Okay, how do we know this? 2 Persian messengers came to the Prophet, and their beards were shaved, and their moustache, the moustaches were big, long. And the Prophet said, if it was allowed to kill messengers, I would have killed you too. Because he hated the face. They looked very ugly to him. So because it's not allowed to kill messengers, I wouldn't do that. Okay. So even at that time, these rules were there. So they killed one of the messengers of the Prophet because he was a Muslim. Okay. He was taking a message of Islam to the king of the Romans.
That's fine. So let's say accept all of this cultural background. Now I do think so the context, let's say it is that the Romans are attacking them for their religion.
Yeah.
Even so, a non-Muslim can very easily say that religious persecution prompted the Muslims to start their own religious persecution to fight them back for their religion.
Look,
I know that you're not saying that, and you can just say it's just rhetorical. It's taking those themes and turning.
I'm not saying it's rhetorical. I'm saying it's actual. I'm saying it's actual. The Romans were attacking Muslims for their religion. The Quran says just like that they're attacking you for their religion. You can attack them because they are not of your religion. Simple as that. They're attacking you because you have Islam.
So you do fight them for their religion, but only when they fight you first.
Yes. That's the bottom line. The bottom line is Muslims cannot start the hostilities. They cannot start the hostilities. They have to live in peace. They have to promote peace. Okay. Quran is full of verses like that. Okay. So you have to read the Quran as a uniform text. Once you do that, you come to realize that Islam in no way, under no circumstances, promote indiscriminate violence or unprovoked violence. It doesn't promote that. In fact, those who did that in the life of the Prophet, he rebuked them. He rebuked them. One of his companions, one of his companions who had killed some of the people, the Prophet refused to give him refuge. He refused to give him refuge. He says, you're not my problem. Go away. Go away.
So I think we've got to a position where...
another example, sorry. When the Muslims are going to conquer Mecca, one of his companions, he ran towards Mecca with the flag. He said, today is the day of slaughter. We will slaughter these Meccans. Who are the Meccans? Same people who have been killing the Prophet, Prophet's companions, his uncles, his relatives, everyone. And the Prophet said to his companions, hold him, bring him back. They went, they captured him, then brought him back, and the Prophet took the flag away from him. He said, today is the day of mercy. It's not the day of slaughter. So that's the example we learn from the Prophet. Okay, he was a practical man, following the teachings of Islam practically. Someone is trying to who is this? Who is this? Reporting to police, man. Who is this? Who was that? Who is this guy? So hold this. Huh? No, I was going to tell him to go somewhere else. Yeah. So the bottom line is, under no circumstances, we can interpret the verse to somehow substantiate indiscriminate violence against non-Muslims. Okay, so it cannot be interpreted in that way for a number of reasons. Number one, our theology is against that. Our theological sources, our literature is full of ideas that go directly against such notions. Number one. Number two, our history testifies to the fact that the Muslims, when it came to Jews and Christians, they treated them with utmost mercy, justice and compassion.
So let's say accept all that. I think we've got to a point with 929 where we're saying you fight them for their religion because they fought you first.
Because they fought you for your religion.
Fine, because they fought you for your religion. But
verse 68 says the same thing.
Sure. It is quite a confusing thing that could very easily be mistaken for simply fight them for their religion, which is how many which is how many have interpreted 929. Would it not have been a lot clearer for Allah to skip that second stage of fight them for their religion and just stick to the primary reason, which is fight them because they fought you for your religion? Wouldn't that have avoided a whole amount of ambiguity?
I can say the same thing about the Bible. You're a Christian, and I can ask the same question. Why
That's a fair response. Absolutely.
But why didn't God put down clearly, or Jesus said clearly, I'm God?
Okay.
All he had to say was one sentence.
Sure.
He had the time to rebuke the Pharisees and Sadducees and rebuke the tree, all of that, but he couldn't say I'm God in one sentence.
Sure.
But I'm not going to say that. I can argue like that, but I'm not going to argue like that. What I'm saying is that interpretation carries no weight Quranically, because chapter 60 verse 8 clarifies that it is because of the religion. It is because of the religion. So it complements the verse 9, Surah 9 verse 29. It complements that. How? Because even chapter 60 verse 8, what does it state? It states, if they fight you not for your religion. It's exactly the same subject.
Sure.
It's exactly the same subject.
Assuming the Shafis aren't correct in saying that that's been abrogated. But yes, as you say, that's not the mainstream interpretation. Okay, that's fine. And you make a very good point. If I'm going to talk about God making it clear, you're right. You've got to apply that to the Bible too. In terms of that argument, why didn't God make it clearer? There's a limited value.
I think it's clear enough. I think for me, because I know the context, I've read the commentaries, I've seen the prophetic tradition and the behavior of the Prophet himself in the light of these verses. What did the Prophet do? What did his successors do? The people who took the Quran directly from him, how did they actually understand this verse? How did they understand it? They understood it exactly the way I understand it.
Sure, with your interpretation of Islamic history, obviously people differ on that and they're entitled to. So I just want to clarify for the camera, for you as well. Got to be consistent. That argument can be made against the Bible as well. The point you made about you think it's sufficiently clear, I think the Gospels are sufficiently clear about Jesus being God as well. So it's not a watertight argument. It's got to be weighed up against many other factors.
No, but it is.
So for me, I've got to weigh up what I think is the ambiguity of 929 in what you're saying. I've got to weigh that up against the other points you make about the other verses in the Quran, about Islamic history. For you, it's very convincing to say that. Islam does not condone violence for religious reasons. For me, it's less convincing because I'm less convinced about what Islamic history has to say in the matter. I'm less convinced about the matter of abrogation. But I think I need to go do my homework.
No, but what are you less convinced about? What is the conviction of?
So, when I had studied it in the past, the position about 9.5, 9.29 abrogating 68, I had thought that my impression, both from reading a popular apologist, also from reading one or two academic sources, secondary literature, my impression had been that it was much more widespread than the Shafi school. So I can't continue that discussion until I go and do my homework to see the truth of that matter. You talk about scenarios where the Muslims were merciful towards non-Muslims, both within their polity and without. I've seen cases brought to me where the opposite is true. So,
such as.
So I mean, fighting the Jewish tribes. There's then a question of were they betraying them, were they not. I've heard it been disputed whether the Romans actually were a military threat to Islam. I'm not claiming that the non-Muslims are true in these assertions.
Well, which history are we?
All I know is they're contested. So
who contested these ideas? The Romans were a threat to Muslims.
Apologists, sometimes academic sources.
Such as?
So one source I've read that's been quite influential on me has been David Cook, Understanding Jihad. He's written about a lot of these issues.
David Cook.
Yeah,
okay.
Understanding Jihad, University of California Press.
Okay.
He seems to think that the Islamic tradition on the whole has been more militaristic.
Yeah.
Than the kind of
He's right.
portraying.
He's right about that.
Okay.
And we don't deny that historically Islamic tradition has been militaristic. Muslim states had been garrison states because they were continuously in a form of conflict with other nations.
Okay.
Not because they were causing conflict, other nations were attacking them.
I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think that David Cook is saying actually
Like
it's more aggressive. It's not just being defensive, it's about attacking for the sake of Islam.
So in some cases it was preemptive aggression.
Okay, I think
for example, in the case of Ottomans, sometimes they went out of the way.
I think his work is going not just talking about preemptive, it's talking about attacking to spread Islam.
Okay.
He could be wrong.
Right.
I don't know much about this issue.
So then in that case, Richard,
I don't have a strong position until I study. Yes.
Right, but I'm trying to look into his argument and rebut it. Present a rebuttal. In that case, having a treaty with non-Muslim nations doesn't make sense, right? Sorry? If that's the case, if it's all-out war, if it's all-out militancy, and if it's all-out conflict, then there is no point in making treaties with non-Muslims.
So from what I understand...
and which the Muslims did, historically, throughout.
Sure. Yeah. So from what I understand from Cook, and I possibly read one or two other academics on this, I can't remember, it's been months since I read this, is that, first of all, Muslims didn't always have the exact same policy. I think that the point is often there was this aggressive interpretation of the Quran and spreading violence.
Yes,
spreading military
in the times of war, you're absolutely right.
But
I'm complimenting your point. During the Crusades, that's what happened.
Okay. But to do with the treaties, what these authors are saying is Islamic legal theory allowed for times of peace, it allowed for treaties, it allowed for times of non-expansion when the Muslim state needed to consolidate, when it wasn't ready for fighting. As long as it was in the long-term interests of Islam, you can have treaties. So treaties don't disprove this theory.
Yes.
But I haven't seen the theory either.
Yeah.
I'm going to go study it more. Obviously, you take a very different perspective. All I was able to talk about was Surah 9, my interpretation of it.
My view is that Islam throughout its history, Muslim dynasties, Muslim rulers, generally speaking, their behavior towards non-Muslims has been very positive, generally. Okay, there are cases where non-Muslims were mistreated by individual rulers, and even in those cases, Muslims stood up to the Muslim ruler to defend the non-Muslims. So we have many examples. This is why we are proud of our history. It's not because of scientific advancement the Muslims achieved. It's also because of the behavior. The golden age of the Jews in Spain, even in Baghdad, even in Damascus, even in India, you name it. I mean, do you concede to the fact that Muslims, in comparison to other civilizations, were a lot more gentle, a lot more merciful and tolerant towards the other when we look at in comparison to other civilizations?
So I mean, towards the other, that's a broader topic that brings in, Hindus, Buddhists, etc. Let's park that for now and just talk about the Jews, which is what you started with. I think that is, I don't know, I think that is the mainstream academic understanding that the Muslim world treated Jews better than the Christian world did. I know there are one or two recent books that have disputed that. I don't know.
Such as which book?
I'm not an expert. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I can find out for you. Either I can try Google now, or
because I am no Mark Cohen has written this book on this issue.
What's it called?
The Crescent, the Crescent and the Cross. It's to do with Jews under the Crescent and the Cross. Okay, Jews under the Crescent and the Cross. And then Bernard Lewis has written his Jews of Islam, and there are other historians such as Zion Zohar. People who have written his book is called History of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewry. These people have argued that no doubt that the Muslims treated the Jews for over 1,000 years with utmost compassion and tolerance. In fact, the Jews flooded